What's going on, guys? No joke, I just did this video maybe 45 minutes ago, and I'm having to do it again because it didn't post. So if you watched it 45 minutes ago and you're like, this already happened, it's because I'm doing it again. The video didn't post, it disappeared, which I have no clue why it did that, but it happened. So here I am, doing the video again, episode 11, Dispersing the Cloud, take two. So, recap of the week. Monday, we had wrestling. Sunday was the last day of wrestling. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I was in San Francisco, and I was doing an eBay commercial. I got hired by Dwyer Productions to do some scouting, do some casting for them, and actually, I got hired to be in the commercial, and then the scene got cut, so I don't get to be in it. But anyway, it was 4 days of working for Dwyer Productions, which is the most they've ever had me work in a row, which is awesome, because that's good news for Fragoza Media and Entertainment. That just means we get more time on set, more time doing things for them. So that was pretty cool to do an eBay commercial. I actually got to get two of Team Alpha Male's fighters in there, so they were in there as well. Got to give them a little exposure, and it made me look good bringing in two actors myself as a production assistant, so that was kind of cool. Setting up days for recording, we did a little bit of that. We have 3 days already booked for, not recording, for the tour. And we're doing more of that next week, but we did set up days for recording. Obviously today we're in the studio. Yesterday, today, and Saturday. We did have a little bit of a fall through for yesterday. We ended up getting double booked, and we weren't in the studio yesterday. We just had to do today. So I am going to do my best to answer your guys' questions as we go along in these updates. I have my computer over here. I'm trying to figure out what the problem was of why it did not go live, and I don't really know if it's working right now or if it's not. If you guys are watching this and it's working, please leave a comment. I'd appreciate it. Process, having an assistant. I have had an assistant for a while. I pay her per hour, on and off, and it's been really awesome to have that. But I also hired an intern recently, and my intern is doing a couple things. They're doing some of the tasks that I don't have time to do while I'm on the road and I'm driving. And second thing is they get to learn the music industry. They get to learn the production industry. They get to help me with the Josh and the Sock Army books and possibly make commissions off some of those sales. And it was difficult to find an assistant that would work, but you know, I say it was difficult. It took some time, but it actually wasn't too difficult. Just putting it out on Craigslist. I had maybe 20 people submit, found one person that worked for me, and it's been great having extra hands helping out. Upcoming next week, we have all of the booking that we're going to do for the tour is going to happen within the next 6 weeks. So we have 6 weeks to book the 35 shows. We've contacted over 250 churches already. We plan on contacting maybe another 100. Just reaching out, letting them know what we're doing, sharing our message, all the above. This week's book was 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. This book was pretty legit. Definite 4.5 stars. We'll see how many stars it gets as I start to implement some of the things that he suggests. I really want to do a trial and error before I give it a 5-star rating. But there's some really interesting things that Tim Ferriss brings up about potentially having a 4-hour work week. So a couple of the things were, the main point of it was what you do is not who you are. So if any of you go to cocktail parties, obviously not everybody goes to cocktail parties, birthday parties, you go to dinner with friends, and you're out and you meet new people, and they ask you, hey, what do you do? If you do what I do, which is like 10 different projects, different things that you're doing, it's a really tough question to answer because one thing doesn't define who I am. But in America, we do this. It's like, hey, what do you do? Well, I'm a carpenter. Oh, well, that's great. I'm a shoe salesman. Well, I'm this, I'm that. And we define ourselves by what we actually do. And he makes the argument that that's not actually healthy, to define yourself by what you do. You can make money doing something and that not be what you do. So I found that to be very interesting. One of the other things that he brought up was time being your most valuable asset. A couple books ago, John Maxwell's How Intelligent People Think, I think that's what it is, How Successful People Think. How Successful People Think by John Maxwell. He talks about you having your strongest attribute, and then he also talks about having the strongest and the most valuable asset. So your strongest asset and your most valuable asset might be two different things. For example, my strongest asset is my ability to make money. If I went back into the workforce, right, I have the ability to make six figures with a master's degree, so that's my strongest asset. But what John Maxwell would say is sometimes you have to sacrifice your strongest asset to protect your most valuable asset. And my most valuable asset is my time. And so if I went back into the workforce and I exercised my strongest asset to make six figures, I'll go back to working 80 hours a week. But that really attacks my greatest asset, right? My most valuable asset is time. And so right now, my strongest asset or my greatest asset is kind of on hold while my most valuable asset is being put to work with all this time that I have to work on all the different projects that I'm doing. So that was a huge thing in this book, 4 Hour Work Week, that Tim Ferriss was talking about. He also talks about the newly rich, the new rich and the old rich. He talks about the old rich as people kind of like our parents, right? They said you get a 401k, you put enough money away and then you're going to retire. That's how it's supposed to be done. And then you have $3 or $4 million in the bank, and then you retire. You do the things you want to do. He said the new rich are trying to create a lifestyle for themselves now. They want to live now and not waste their retirement on being old. There's this saying that says youth is wasted on the young. Right? Well, then don't waste it. Actually go out, travel now while you're young, work abroad. He talks about getting remote access, right? Getting your boss to convincing your boss to let you work away from the office once a week, right? And then once that's working, then twice a week, then 3 times a week, then 4 times. And then you're just working away from home, and you're doing all your work. As long as you're getting your work done, what's the difference? Obviously, in our structure of work, that doesn't make sense. But if you do it in baby steps, as long as you're getting your work done, your boss will slowly start letting you. I mean, the book gives you a step-by-step, like even what to say to him. It's really quite interesting. I have already quit my job, so that stuff won't work for me because I'm already doing what I want to do, and I'm already working from home every single day, and I could do what I'm doing now in Europe if I wanted to. That was one of the big challenges. He was like, what about your job could you not be doing overseas? And literally there's nothing that I couldn't be doing in a different country. Just living in a different country, doing exactly what I'm doing. And that's definitely a want of mine, and I'll probably do that within the next couple of years for sure. So that was pretty sweet. Living on the go, obviously I just talked about that. And there was something he talks about, drop shipping. So drop shipping is actually how Tim Ferriss makes all of his money. He has a company that manufactures, right? Or he found a manufacturer to make his product, and then another company to ship his product. He owns no buildings. He owns no manufacturing facilities. He does no shipping, right? He just hosts a website where people click and order his product. That order goes to the manufacturer, who creates it, who sends it to the shipper, who ships it out. He does nothing. Done. So again, me in projects, I'm like, oh great, now I got to start drop shipping. So within the next year, I'm sure I'll have a website that you can drop ship from. I don't know what products I'm going to sell. I have no idea, but I can't not try it, right? So that's something I'm going to look into. I know a couple of my friends, the Addams family, not the movie, but I have 2 friends with the last name Addams. Never mind. They're doing this. They've already done the groundwork on that, so we're going to meet and have dinner and just chat about that so I can get a better grasp on how it's going for them. And then outsourcing, right? This was one of the last things that he talked about in the book, was outsourcing. Outsourcing not only with assistance here, but assistance in other countries like India. So if right now I have an assistant here in California, and then I have I almost said TA as if I'm a teacher. I got a teacher's assistant. I have an intern here in California as well. So I have an assistant and an intern, and they both do different things for me. But he plays with the idea of outsourcing to India and actually having he calls it a VA, a virtual assistant, having a VA in a different country. So when you're sleeping, that VA is actually doing work for you while you sleep. So essentially you're working 24 hours a day. Now, he relates this obviously to his drop shipping company. So as orders are coming in around the world, he literally has a virtual assistant answering emails for him, making sure orders are going correct. And he says that he checks his email once a week, and he checks status updates 3 times a month or 4 times a month for his products to see how sales are, and he just collects a check. He makes, I think he was saying like $80,000 a month doing drop shipping stuff on his product. It was really intriguing. I'll let you guys know in the process of how it goes as I start getting deeper into it. So I think for me, next step for me is, we know we have, we talked about it before, I have a business launching in Lodi within the next month. We should have already started paying rent on our location, but that's being held up a little bit. I have 2 new books that I want to publish this year. And then I definitely want to look into buying my first home this year. But the other thing I want to do before I buy my first home now is to start a drop shipping company. I like to start new projects. I'm not a good project finisher, so that's why I need people driving on me to get this stuff done. But I love it. That's pretty much the book, 4-Hour Work Week. Great read, step by step, how to do a lot of this stuff. If you are one of those people who, like me, was working 80 hours a week in a corporate job, read this book. Take some of the tips from it to really lower your workload and maximize your productivity throughout the week. Very good tips. A lot of stuff that I'm going to take from it and start implementing in my own businesses and my own practice of trying to make my time more profitable. Upcoming next week, we have, upcoming, for the book next week, I need you guys to suggest a few books. I'm running out of books. I've read 21 books so far, and I need you guys to give me some more to read. The goal is to read 100. I was actually talking to my buddy Mark. Mark Joyner was in town. He came in, he did some recording, and he actually got to be on the album, which is cool. He's not a singer, but we put him in like a choir part. And I was talking to him about reading this many books over the course of a very, very short time. And I hear stories, right? Like the story of the guy who had a garden of peas, right? And he noticed that 20% of his peas were producing 80% of his yield, right? Which means 80% of his peas the pods really weren't putting out peas. He said that translates over into like society as well. So you have 20% of people, right, in America, 20% of people in the world are really doing all the work. They're providing everything, right? And there's 80% who really just aren't doing much. They're just here. Maybe they're just floating through life, right? They're really not trying to do anything. And it carries over into business too. So he tore apart his business, and sure enough, he found that 20% of his clients were providing 80% of his business. So what he did is he fired the other 80% of his clients, because that 80% was causing 90% of his headaches. And then he looked at the 20% of his clients and he said, I'm just going to try to replicate these guys. This is what they have. I'm going to look for other companies like them, add those companies, and he tripled his income within like a month. Really cool stuff like that. But anyway, I was talking to Mark about this idea that I noticed that in 4 different books, but I wouldn't have noticed that it was the same story if I wouldn't have been reading so many books rapidly, right? If I was reading a book a year, 2 books a year. Average American reads 1 to 2 books a year, and that's pushing it, right? It's really just 1. I'm giving you guys the 2. So they read 1 to 2 books a year. If you read a book a year, you hear that story, right? It might be 3 years later till you hit another book with that same story. 3 years from now, you're like, man, where do I know that story from? I feel like I've heard that before, and it wouldn't really click. Maybe 3 or 4 more years go by. You read another book, same story. God, I feel like that was in another book, but I can't remember. It was years ago I read that book. By the 4th time you hit that story, it's been 10, 15 years, you hit the story, you're like, wow, 20% of my business, that's where 80% of the profit comes from. Man, I should really look into that. 15 years went by before you noticed that trend in the book. Because all these authors, they're all saying the same thing, right? And I've been saying it for 3-4 weeks when I started noticing that all these successful authors are all saying the exact same thing, just different ways. But I noticed those trends because I read 20 books, or I listened to, sorry. People get upset already. My buddies have been giving me crap. They're like, you're not reading anything, bro. No, I'm listening to. But I listened to 21 books in less than 3 months, and I noticed those trends. So you're not going to notice a trend if you're reading 1 book a year or 2 books a year or 3 books a year. You're not going to notice trends in books and trends in successful people. You really have to be reading 3 or 4 books a month minimum to even see those trends and notice them and add them into your life. Anyway, I was telling Mark that these books, me reading these books, have already made me money. Start with Why helped me get into schools for the first time. 10X Rule helped fund my Kickstarter. You know, and it's helped me doing this tour right now. The Grant Cardone, his If You're Not First, You're Last, inspired me to seek the 10 grand loan that I needed for the Josh and the Sock Army books. And so just within the last 3 months of me taking on this challenge of reading a book a week, which I'm smashing, I've read 2 books a week. It's been 11 weeks and I got 21 books underneath my belt right now. So I'm looking at how much CEOs make. $300 million a year, and the question was posed to me, do they make too much money? I would have said yes, they make way too much money. But looking at it now, seeing the value that comes from reading 60 to 100 books a year that they claim to do, and I see now that it's possible because I'm a pretty busy guy, but I find the time to get it done and even do a blog about it. If I didn't have to do a 20-minute blog and prep for the blog and all that, I could read or listen to even more. I think that they probably are adequately paid because the knowledge, the time they're spending on learning knowledge, it's not difficult knowledge. It's a high school educated person can understand it, but it's just really the repetition of getting it over and over and over again. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that. Book of next week, I already said you guys need to suggest some books for me so I can start tackling some more. And I'm running out. A word of inspiration for this week comes from Grant Cardone. Create new problems for yourself. One of the things that I did this year was I created a new problem for myself. I went and did school readings for schools, and I found some schools who were okay with me reading without having product, right? I said, hey, the books are on back order, which they are. I had no product. I'd love to read for you, but the kids won't have the books until I get them printed. That forced me to solve the problem of getting the books printed. I asked 3 different friends. Well, I asked a bunch of different friends for money. I mean, that's not a comfortable situation, asking your friends for money. And you could say, oh man, you'd sacrifice relationships just to promote what you're doing. If they get offended by that, then they weren't good relationships to begin with, right? I'm not trying to rob my friends. I'm literally trying to make them money. It was an investment, not a loan me some money and I'll just pay you back. It was, hey, let me try to make you some money. I got 3 different people to agree to give me $10,000. The first one fell through. I had asked somebody else. The second one fell through. I I had to find somebody else. And the third guy literally just gave me his credit card. He was like, go. And that was someone I had just met like 3 weeks prior. I didn't even ask him for the money. I just said, hey, is there anybody that you know that I should know that would be looking to invest in a project? Because I have some. I know you do some investing yourself, not necessarily for you, but anybody you know. And he'd met me and known me for 2 weeks. He was like, hey, I know you got a lot of stuff going on. How much is it? I said, oh, I'm looking for about 10 grand. He literally pulled out his wallet and handed me his credit card. He said, go, do whatever you got to do. I trust you. What's the percent back that I'm going to get? So I'll give you 10% back. You're going to make some money on it. All right, cool. Fine with it. So I never would have got out of my comfort zone. I never would have done that. Go out, create new problems for yourself. Don't get trapped up by fear. Know that your brain, rich dad, poor dad, right? Your brain will do what it's supposed to do. It will solve the problem, but it has to be urgent. If it's not urgent, it's not going to solve the problem. So create new problems for yourself. Get your brain working, and your brain will solve those problems if you put it in the spot. Put it on the spot. Make it help you out. That's all I got for you guys. I'm going to try to make sure that this one goes up. Again, this is the second time I've done this one for today. I got the drummer, I got Joey, our drummer, coming in right now to lay some tracks. He's probably outside waiting for me. I'm going to take off. I'll do some videos and some Instagram stuff from inside the studio today while he's playing. So check me out on Instagram and watch some more stuff from the studio. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Later.